So, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. As you will know from the invitation, today we're going to look at how charities can use custom GPTs to supercharge comms and fundraising. So, brief agenda. I'll do a quick intro and overview. We'll talk about ethics, trust, and privacy in AI. We'll cover what a custom GPT actually is, some real use cases that can be used within charities, and then we're going to build and train a GPT and put it to the test. Finally, we've got a few tips and tricks and Q&A session at the end. So, little introduction into Studio Republic. First and foremost, we've got an absolutely incredible team of real experts in their field. And it covers a variety of different skill sets. So from user research into brands, so brand development, brand strategy, brand application. We've got a user experience department. They delve deep into making sure that all journeys on websites are optimized and that the user experience on your site or your digital product is as good as it can be. And then last but not least, the development team who bring it all to life through their code. Our mission and our kind of mission statement is built to amplify purpose. And what that means is everything that we do is focused around basically amplifying the purpose of the charities that we work with. So really making sure that the mission is first and foremost through everything that we do, and everything that we provide for our clients is fully optimized to help engage and convert potential donors, fundraisers, volunteers, you name it. We're B Corp accredited since 2019, so we were one of the first agencies in the country to go through accreditation, and we're still with it now. And we're a remote team, so we work all from home. We don't have an office anymore, and we're based from Newcastle in the north all the way down to Mauritius in the south, so fairly spread out geographically. As I said before, we focus on charities, but we only work with charities. So our focus is purely on supporting people in the third sector, and this is just a small selection of the lovely clients that we work with. So that's enough about us. Let's talk about AI. So one of the key considerations when you're thinking about using AI in an organization is around the ethics, the trust and privacy aspect of it. And a few things to bear in mind. So AI is incredibly powerful, but it does need human guidance. It needs to be prompted and really ring fenced and given as much context as possible to make sure that it's giving you tangible, usable results. And for that, it really needs human guidance. It really needs an understanding of how it works and how to best prompt it to get the most out of it and the most accuracy out of it. Because GPTs can reflect bias. So all of the information in there is information that's been scraped essentially from the web, from a load of different resources, from publications, that kind of thing. But any of those resources that it has been used to train with, if there's bias in that bias will end up in the GPT's knowledge base. So it's really, really important to review absolutely everything that it comes back with from a prompt. And it should really be used to support people. It shouldn't be a way of cutting costs or replacing team members. It should be used as a supportive tool for your existing teams. And that's especially important when there's anything sensitive. We'd never recommend using AI to replace someone that's in service delivery or is dealing with vulnerable people and giving any sort of advice. It can absolutely be used to research data, but we would never say to take what it's given and just use that verbatim. It's really important to never upload any personal or sensitive data. Anything that is given to AI, you really have to assume that data is going to end up as training material and could resurface in someone's future prompts to ChatGPT. So it's really important if you are using data that it's anonymized first. So never never upload any personal or sensitive data. And the other thing to consider is every AI prompt has an environmental impact. For context, each prompt uses energy. It's it's hard to estimate, and lots of people have tried. The latest estimates are about 0.3 of a watt hour per query, which doesn't really mean very much. But when you take ChatGPT as a whole, it's estimated to use 40 million kilowatt hours of energy a day. It's the equivalent of charging 8 million phones. And in their data centers, many of them are cooled by water, and it uses about 39 million gallons of water a day, which is the equivalent of filling 978,000 baths. So, every prompt is a tiny proportion of that, but cumulatively it does have an impact. So it's worth bearing in mind that, anything that you do when you're interacting with AI does have an environmental cost to it. So specifically, what is a custom GPT? Everyone's heard of ChatGPT, but this kind of takes it further than just the blank interface that you get when you start interacting with it. So essentially, it's your own version of ChatGPT. It's something very specific to you that you've set up for your specific use case. It will learn from your content and tone. It's really ideal for fundraising comms, for bid writing, and loads more. So in terms of creating content, it's brilliant, but it's also really good at now analyzing data. So when you have got massive spreadsheets that you want to get an idea from, if you are writing bids and you want to have it follow something that was successful before, understand the bid that you're writing for, you can give it all of that context and really help you do a lot of the legwork. Like I said before, you'd never take it verbatim, but it can do a lot of the kind of grounding for this to save a whole load of time within your teams. You don't need to know any code. It's all done through the web interface. And OpenAI, who are behind ChatGPT, do offer non-profit discounts, so you can save a bit of money if you go onto their business plan, which is nice. So some kind of real use cases to put it into context. So around social and content creation, it can be used to write blogs from a bullet points. It can write social posts in your tone of voice. And you can do things like turning reports. So maybe you have an annual report and you want to just summarize that into an update for your supporters. It's really good at that. In terms of fundraising emails, it can create some really donor-centered copy. It can come up with some really effective subject lines and call to action for your fundraising emails. And it can use stories and the data that you give it to really provide impact to those. Bid and grant writing, like I said, you can feed it successful bids from the past so it can learn from them. It can create your first drafts for bid RFPs really quickly. And it can use a clear and consistent tone and structure. So you know that everything that's going to come out, because you've trained it in the right way, is going to fit with how you communicate as an organization. And then around data analysis, so it can very quickly and easily spot trends within CSV or spreadsheet data. Again, never upload personal data in those, but it can summarize findings from those from that data really quickly and easily, which is something that would have taken a lot of manual effort and some real deep understanding around data analysis to do previously. So moving on to creating a custom GPT. So there's a few things that you need to have in place. So you do need a commercial account. You need a paid for account with ChatGPT. That starts at £20 a month for a plus plan. But that same account can be used by multiple people within the team. So it's not locked to a single computer or a single user. You can use that for multiple people within the organization. And with that, you need to supply knowledge files. So this is the grounding that ChatGPT will then use for its prompts, and we'll get into what they can contain in a moment. And then we have what's a system prompt. So this is something that ChatGPT will essentially be prompted with before your prompt. So it gives a whole load of instructions around how you want it to behave. So you don't have to basically reinvent that every single time. All of this sits in the background so that anything that you prompt it in the future has a huge amount of context and information about your charity. So it will always be on brand. It will always have all of the information that it needs to produce content which is really relevant to you and to your audience. So knowledge files, these are basically the information that it will need to understand about your charity to really get that context right. These could be things around your mission, your tone of voice, your branding, the history of the organization, and then any other supporting materials. So you could have a document that had a load of emails that have been really successful when you've sent out to donors. It could have annual reports. It can have basically anything that you like that you think will help give that context and that power to what you're doing. What is really important that they are done in a certain way to make them really useful for the GPT. So each file should have a single purpose and should be clearly named, because the naming of that is important. They should always use plain English and short sentences to make them really, really easy to understand. They should be structured with clear headings, with numbering, and really importantly, with do and do not lists and banned terms. So you've got to be really, really clear about the direction that you want it to go in. Any facts should be stated, as well as any definitions. You should avoid duplication wherever possible between those files. With that, you would specify accessibility and inclusion rules, things like reading ages, that kind of thing. You can give that to, so it will bear that in mind when it's writing any content for you. Similarly, you need to include notes around privacy and GDPR. And for any of these files, they should use text friendly formats. So not Word documents. Markdown is a very specific kind of developer way of writing content. It's the easiest for ChatGPT to understand, and we'll share a resource for basically a very easy Markdown editor afterwards. With things like Google Docs, you can also export as Markdown. It just means that it removes all of the fluff. It just has the pure raw content in there. And then in terms of anything that's data related, CSV files rather than Excel files, again, you can export that. And if you want to get really techie, JSON, which is a way of making really structured data. It's not necessary, but the more structured and the simpler you can make the data, the easier it is for ChatGPT to understand and to be able to process effectively for you. Then the system prompt. So this then is, like I say, it's the precursor to any prompt that you enter. So this defines the role and the scope. So this will say, you are working on behalf of X charity, and you will be producing resources for our communications department, for example. So it sets out, what it's acting as, essentially. You set rules in there. You define the tone and style. You add any safety and governance aspects that you want it to bear in mind. And with that, you can also include the audience targeting. So you'd be acting on behalf of charity X, talking to our fundraisers, our volunteers, our high net worth donors, that kind of thing. So you can really give it the background that it needs to be effective. So you also give it the citation behavior. So you would say, that you only, if you are referencing something, you need to give the source of that information. So rather than it just giving a load of data or a load of information back, if it's ever got that data from its own training, where did it get it from? So you can be very clear that this is an AI generated bit of data in there. You would define conflict handling. So in terms of tone of voice, you would say that this is a single point of truth for anything related to the tone of voice. So someone can't accidentally override that when they're creating a prompt. You create a self checklist. So, whenever you create content, always check that it's using UK English, that it's using correct grammar, that kind of thing. So you get it basically to check its own work. And you can encourage efficiency. So you can ask it for the first draft, send me a synopsis, and then from that, create the full version. So it's not creating a huge amount of data all from the get-go. You can have it as a short draft and then have it expand on it. So I needed some information. I needed to create a GPT. So I used ChatGPT to create a fictitious charity. So this is the prompt that I use. So I'm writing a webinar for best use of custom GPTs. I basically wanted it to create me a fictitious charity with a fictitious tone of voice, mission statement, history. So this is the prompt that I used. And this is what it came up with. Even designed me a logo. So for the purposes of this, we're dealing with the Lighthouse Community Charity, who purpose is to reduce food insecurity. They're based in Hampshire, so they have the founded date, they have the scale, signature approach, and tone of voice. So all of this very handily built out for me. This is the charity that we're going to be working with. So then we get into the individual files that we're training for. It's really good practice at the start of any training file that you're going to give it to, so this kind of knowledge base, to give it a section at the top that it can understand. So it has a title, it has the canonical name, it has an abbreviation, it has a strap line. Importantly, the last updated and version number. So this will then allow you to update with a new file, because the new file will have version 2.0. ChatGPT will know to replace that knowledge with this one, that something has changed in it. If you just uploaded another file with the same file name, it wouldn't be able to handle that change quite as well. So it's really important that you keep the last updated and version numbers correct. Within this, we've got an intended audience, so all comms teams, fundraisers, AI assistants, and usage notes. We're going to use this to guide all messaging and prioritize what the charity stands for. So within this, I'm not going to go through all of this, but you can see that the structure here is we have numbered sections, we have bullet points within there. We're using bold to really highlight to ChatGPT the things that we are standing for. So we've got a core mission statement, we've got the purpose and reason for being, we've got a vision, we've got values, we've got strategic goals, we've got the unique approach of the organization. We move into tone of voice. So this is how you're setting it out as to how to communicate. Really, really important. So we want it to communicate in a warm, practical, and non-judgmental way, hopeful without hype, clear, plain English that respects people's dignity. So we've got personality traits in here. So this is how we're going to communicate. So we're going to be passionate, straight talking, trustworthy, hopeful, and local, because we're a very regional charity. We're going to communicate with warmth and empathy, authority and trust, hope and agency, clarity and accessibility. We've got some language guidelines, so we're telling it to always use UK English. We've got a reading level of 9 to 12, because we want any copy that's created to be as inclusive as possible, telling it to keep sentences under 20 words. And we're always going to use the first person and second person. So we're always talking about we and you, not them and they. We're avoiding jargon. We're telling it how to handle dates. Again, use people first language. Never share identifiable case details without explicit consent. So this is a safeguard that even if someone does upload some personal information, hopefully this will not ever use that when it's giving content back. We've got stigmatizing phrases to avoid. And then formatting, we want to use headings and subheadings, bullets, we want emphasis, we want clear calls to action. And whenever there's link, we want a descriptive text for that. So we don't want to click here ever to appear. We want something like read up 24 to 25 impact summary. What's really useful is to give good and bad phrases. So we've got some good phrases here and we've got some avoids. So it's really important to give as much on the kind of negative training as a positive. So things to avoid as well as things to include. And then we've got some adaptations for different audiences. So, you know, when we're talking about beneficiaries, we're going to use friendly, direct, low effort actions, volunteers, individual donors. You get it. So this will then be able to adapt its style depending on what it is that you're asking it to do. Then history, this is basically the history of it. So all of the key milestones of the charity, the founding story, we've got the current scale and reach in terms of how the charity's set up currently. And then we've got the kind of challenges that we've faced, and then the kind of legacy and the future. So really important also that you're including the kind of future aims and ambitions of the charity in here. Then the system prompt. So this, as I said before, this is what runs before any of your actual prompts. So I won't go into absolutely every line of this, but key points here is we're giving it grounding. So we're telling it that our knowledge files are the single source of truth using British English. We're telling it which files to look in for which information. We've got, again, we're just talking about the tone of voice again here. Although we've got a tone of voice document, it's important to really get that clear. Then we've got some output rules about, you know, calls to action, placeholders. When we're writing an email, we want variations on subject lines. So we're asking it to always produce 2 to 3 subject lines. A preview line, so that's something that would appear within, say, Outlook or Gmail, something that's beyond the subject line, but just gives a bit more context. And then we want a greeting, a scannable body, clear call to action and sign off. Similarly for web copy, we're asking it to give us a meta title and description. And we've got numbers, we've got, again, that formatting rules around how numbers should be represented. Safety, really important. Do not invent personal stories. ChatGPT will have a tendency to try and please. And without this, it could just decide that I'm going to create a fictitious person because I think this would help support this donor journey. So important to get that in there. Anonymized, no medical, financial, or legal advice. So we're only going to signpost. It's never going to come back with anything where it makes any sort of advice to a user. No judgmental. Then we're covering off things about comparisons and recommendations, default contact details. So if nothing is supplied in a specific prompt, these are the ones that you want to come back to. We've got some canonical facts. So exactly who we are, when we started, where we're based, that kind of thing. And then ambiguity. So if unclear, provide a sensible default. So always put a placeholder if it doesn't know the information. And on top of that, ask follow-up questions. So we're asking it that if it's not sure about what we've prompted it, to ask for more information if it needs it. So let's build a GPT. So when you have a paid for ChatGPT account, you have the option to create a GPT, but you also have access to a huge amount of pre-created GPTs that people have made. Some of these will be free, so they'll just be ones that have been really carefully honed by people and given a load of information. Others will link out to paid for services. So there's quite a few now focused on SEO. So they'll have an external service that will do the crawling of the website, will make the suggestions. But what the AI will then allow you to do is query that data, will help you define things like your keywords and descriptions, that kind of thing. So it's worth having a look through here. There are thousands of these. They vary greatly in quality. Never trust anything that they give out as 100%, but some really, really useful tools on here that you can use. But what we're interested in is creating one. So we have at the top here create. So there's a number of fields that we want to use in here. So we're going to make this, we'll call it Lighthouse Assistant. We can give a short description, as this is going to be an internal tool. We don't really need to explain to an external audience how it works or what it is, so we can leave that one blank. But if it's something that you wanted to give a bit more context for your internal team, you can provide in there a description that would then give them a bit of help and advice into how they are supposed to be using it. Then we've got the instructions. So this is our system prompt. So this is the bit that we just showed. So up to 8,000 characters, that really gives the kind of background and grounding for it. We can provide some conversation starters. So if we wanted to guide our users in how to use the GPT, we can add these in here. It's not essential. It doesn't affect the effectiveness of it. It just might be useful for your teams to have a bit of an idea of what it is that they could be doing. Then we can upload our knowledge files. So we have in here our history, our mission statement, and our tone of voice document. So we can then upload these. Once they've uploaded, these are now available for absolutely any prompt that comes up in the future. We have some options here in terms of models. Now, ChatGPT 5 is the most recent release, so it has the most up-to-date data. It technically has the most power, although opinions are divided whether it's actually a step forward from ChatGPT 4. But with GPT-5, you have the option of a thinking model. So rather than just going and grabbing its data and outputting it on the screen, it will spend more time grabbing the data and then basically going deeper in thought to provide a better answer. It takes longer. It does use more energy. I would say leave it so that users can choose the model, because it's quite useful sometimes to make a comparison between those different models when you are prompting. In terms of capabilities, we've got a few options here. So web search, we can allow it to go off and basically search the web, grab content from other websites and bring that back into the output that it provides. For this, we're going to turn that off because we don't want it going and researching and potentially coming back with information that doesn't relate to us. We've given it everything it needs. It shouldn't need to go off and search the web. Canvas is a really useful tool. So if it's writing long form content, you can actually then have it presented in a kind of editor window, but then you can do follow-up prompts on certain sections of content in there. So it's really useful if you're writing long form content, because you can adapt it and hone it within the browser without having to take it out, make some changes and put it back in if you needed to. Image generation is something which can be a bit controversial, can also be really useful. You can use it to generate photographic images, but it's also really handy if you want to create any like data visualizations, that kind of thing. It's doing a better and better job of that. So I would normally leave that on. And then we want code interpreter and data analysis. We're not going to be using it to write code, but we do want it to be able to analyze any data that we give it. So we'll check that on. Actions is something that we're not going to go into today with this, but what an action can do is basically connect to a third-party site. So when I said about the SEO GPTs, that will have an action that will allow it to go off and query an external database. So you could then connect your internal tools. You could have, say, an API integration into your CRM system, and it would allow it to pull real data at the point of prompting from your CRM. So rather than having to upload data about your donors, we could have it just there available to use anytime, and it would be able to just go and grab that data. Super, super powerful. But like I say, it's not something that we're really going to be concerned with for this demonstration. So once we've got all of that in, we can click create. We've got the option of how we're going to share it. So we can have it only me, so no one can access this apart from the signed in account. For this sort of thing, I would keep it to that. You can open it up slightly with anyone with the link, so you were then able to share a link to it and someone else can use it with a different ChatGPT account. Or if it's something that you want it to be publicly available, you can add it to the GPT store and anyone can use it. I'm going to make this anyone with the link so that anyone afterwards that wants to have a play with it can. So we'll save that. We'll give it a minute just to process. Awesome. So now we can view our GPT. So it starts with a completely blank slate. So we're going to give it a couple of bits of data analysis to do to start with. So I've got some sample data that we're going to use for this. We have a donor survey that we conducted fictitiously with our fictitious audience. So we asked a load of 1 to 10 questions of that audience. So around overall impression, likely to give again, trust, communication, that kind of thing. So we've got a bit of a broad spectrum of things that people might feed back. And then we've got the geographical location. Absolutely nothing personally identifiable in here, so we're safe to use this. So what we would do with this prompt is we would add a file. So we have the data that we've used and we have a prompt. So this is a very open prompt. This is not asking it a very specific task. This is just basically to use its judgment to spot any trends in the data. So if we give this, it takes in the data so we can see that it's there and it's able to access it. And now it's often analyzing. So this can take a little while. We haven't given it a massive data set, so it shouldn't take too long to come back with some information for us. But no doubt, because we're doing this live, it's going to take its time. And here we go. So it's come back with average donor survey ratings per category. So it's given us an average across the board. It's given us some regional averages, so we can see basically what areas of the country we're getting the best response from. And then it's given us some clear trends. So donors review us positively, which is great, 7.5 out of 10. They trust our use of funds, and ease of donating is also rated very well. So our donation journey is working well. What we're not so good at is communicating the impact of our donations and the connection to the local community and likelihood to recommend. So we've got some clear aspects from this that we need to build on. We've then got some regional stats in this, and then it's built it up into a really nice summary. So donors like and trust us, the scope to strengthen the local neighbour feeling outside the Hampshire hubs, and tailored communications around different regions would be really useful. And now it's made a suggestion. So would you like to draft a short donor feedback summary? So we can literally just say yes, and we can let it come up with that. So what do we want to do? Actually, we want both. So we'll tell it both. So now, as we asked for before, we've got 3 options for subject lines. We've got a preview line, and then we've got a personalized email, basically summarizing back to the person that filled it in that, thank you for taking part in the survey, and what we're going to do with it. And then we've got basically our internal report that we can send to our staff. So it will keep on basically trying to please. So now we're being asked, do we want to create a one-page visual dashboard? Again, we can just say yes to this, and it will then go and create a dashboard for us. So super powerful in terms of analyzing that data, but then also giving us something actionable that we can use with it. I wouldn't say its artistic skills are particularly great, but what we haven't done is given it anything around the use of colors. So if we had told it that only ever use blue in charts, it would create these as blue charts. So really useful in terms of that kind of data analysis from basically from a very simple survey. What we're going to do now is give it some more in-depth information. So we have a development account on our fundraising platform of choice called Fundraise Up. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of that because quite a few of you use it within your charities. This has a lot more information in it. So we've got data in here around different campaigns. We've got whether people donated monthly or one-off, how much they donated, whether they covered the fees, is it recurring or not, what method they used, did they sign up to mailing list, were they anonymous, and where they are, and whether they claimed gift aid. So there's a lot more for ChatGPT to get its head around. So if we add that data in, we'll give it something a little bit more specific this time. So we're telling it it's an export of donations received via Fundraise Up, so it knows what data it's going to be working with. We're telling it that you're going to be analysing this data to spot trends in giving. And then the first task is to give me the proportion of users who opted into gift aid. So some clear deliverable on this one. So get it started. Obviously, the first thing it needs to do is go through and analyze this data and get an understanding of it. So from this, we can see that 91% did not opt into gift aid and 40 donors did. So just 1 in 10 are choosing to opt into gift aid. So disappointing that we've not got more. So from this, we can use this, we can further analyze that data, but what we could actually do is start to use that fact that people haven't opted in. So we can ask it to let me brief to not in asking them to gift aid. So we want to try and convert those people. So we can now reach out to all of these people with a link to our gift aid with a clear but brief message in the usual thing that we'll get an extra 25p for every pound that you give. So really taking that data, seeing some insight from it, and then actioning it straight away. Hopefully that gives a bit of a flavor of what it can be done with it. Like I said before, the more honed you are, the more purposeful you are in those instructions, the better the information it's going to give back to you. But it could be absolutely any use case at all in terms of content writing. What's really important is using AI to hone your prompt. So you don't have to rely on guessing whether you've written a good prompt or not. You can write a prompt and then ask AI to improve that prompt for you before you prompt it. So you can have a couple of steps in your own process to make sure that what you're doing is as optimized as it can be. Using follow-up prompts, so not just taking the first draft, you can ask it to refine, to improve, hone to really get the focus on there. Updating the knowledge, obviously, as the organization changes, you need to reflect that within the data that you give it. So keeping those version controlled knowledge files up to date is really, really important, especially when you're talking about the history of a charity, just to make sure that it's always got the most up-to-date information possible. Don't completely trust the outputs. GPTs do hallucinate. They will make things up. Even with the best intention and the best prompts, it does and probably always will happen. So always make sure that everything is double checked. Never copy and paste out of a GPT and use it. Keeping humans in the loop is massively important. Everything that comes out should be double checked and should be proofread. Keeping a note of what works and what doesn't work is really, really useful, and sharing that information among the team, as you get to use it more, as you get to get more proficient at getting the best out of it, always kind of share that information. And really important to measure the impact that it has. A GPT should never be a replacement for a human being, but what it can do is save, say, a fundraising team that spend, say, I don't know, a day really crafting and honing a donor email. Well, 4 hours of that day could be done with the first draft by AI, and then the rest of that day is freed up. So you've got real kind of efficiency savings that mean that your teams can be working on really delivering impact rather than doing the kind of background time consuming work that can be handed off to an AI. Any questions? Let me stop sharing and just see if anyone has anything that they would like to pick my brains on. We've got a couple of questions in here. Word or character limit or file size for each of the 20 knowledge files. There's not a file size limit to it. I use one personally, which has, I think there's one 18 megabyte file in there. And I'm doing my music production. So there isn't a file size limit to that. The hard limit is on that system prompt. So making sure that doesn't exceed the 8,000 characters, because it just will ignore anything over that. A question from Stacy: do you know if this is applicable to Copilot? Microsoft is a very different beast. It has similar functionality, but this is all applicable specifically to ChatGPT. So you can achieve the same sort of results, but in a very different way if you're using Copilot. Are there any other questions that we can open up to hidden people? Cool. Well, hopefully that's been useful. Thank you, Stuart. Cool. GPT link. Yes, absolutely, Amy. So after this, we'll be sending out an email to everyone that consented, which will have a link to rewatch the webinar. We'll have a link to this custom GPT so you can have a play with it. And we're also going to share the files that we use to train it as well, so you can see kind of how they're structured and that kind of best practice for those. So yeah, you'll have everything you should need to get started with it. And a tiny bit less scared of AI. Excellent, Stuart. I'm glad that I've reassured you slightly, hopefully. Didn't go too much into the doom and gloom of things. Awesome. Cool. If there are no more questions, we will leave it at that. But like I said at the start, thank you very much for joining us today. It's hopefully you found it useful. We're going to carry on with a series of webinars where we're kind of just sharing some best practices from the team as a whole. So the next one will be around user experience. We've already hosted one that Paul, our brand lead, ran a few months ago. That's on the website in the resources section. If you want to rewatch that at any time, you can go and have a look. And as you did give consent, we're not going to bombard you, but we will ping you an email when the next one's being released so that you can sign up to it. Stuart, I wish there was a way you could sign up to them all, because that would make my life a lot easier, but Zoom doesn't allow that. So it does need to be one by one, but we will we'll absolutely keep you in the loop when the next one's around. So yeah, we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much everyone for coming, and yeah, hopefully see you again on the next one. Take care.